In part one of these videos on Christian nationalism, I went into detail about Vance Belter and the driving force behind the motivation that led him to commit those extremist acts here in Minnesota on June 14th of this year. In part two, I will go further into detail regarding how serious it is that Christian nationalism is understood as the linchpin and the foundation behind Maga and its driving influence and the entire reason why we are facing a democracy in crisis right now. My name is Scott Schneider. This is Fed Up in Minnesota. So, if the New Apostolic Reformation has only loose affiliations and a web of loose affiliations, how are we to tie it with today's political climate and its being a driving force behind MAGA? Well, let's return to the forward story. What we do know is that several prominent Christian nationalists also boast Christ for the Nations as their alma mater, including at least two involved with the Jan 6 insurrection. The Bible College's statement of values strongly inveighs against homosexuality, as we saw on their website, grouping it alongside bestiality and incest, calling all of these behaviors intolerable and deplorable. It also has a long section condemning abortion and equating it with infanticide. The school, confirming that Belter had attended and graduated in 1990, said in the statement that this slogan referring to prayer being violent, that it was fervent and passionate, but not literal violence. In the same statement, the Bible school said that it unequivocally rejects, denounces, and condemns any and all forms of violence and extremism, be it politically, religiously, racially, or otherwise motivated, and that its language about warfare against evil is purely a spiritual one. To which I say, if that is the case, then why are you preaching these extremist political views and intolerances to them, including especially abortion, gay rights, and etc., whereas there may be many instances where abortion may be necessary for a woman's, not only for her life, but also it may be invaluable to her choosing to get herself out of a deplorable situation herself in which she can't deal with the burden of an unwanted or a forced pregnancy. But I digress. The school, going back now to the religious news, the school does have ties to leaders of the New Apostolic Reformation, including several evangelical supporters of President Donald Trump. Dutch Sheets, the school's former executive director, speaker, and prophet Cindy Jacobs, and Lance Wallnau, a preacher who prophesied that Trump would become president. A 2013 edition of The Voice, the school's magazine, features an interview with Wallnau where he discusses the Seven Mountain Mandate. Now, all of these actors are going to become even more clear to you as I continue to dive down this rabbit hole of extreme evangelicalism. Let's go ahead. This is a story by Mother Jones. This is back last November, December. The New Apostolic Reformation is the greatest threat to U.S. democracy you've never heard of. One August evening, I drove through the cornfields and dairy farms at Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, to attend a government-themed prayer night at Freda Community Church. This is the reporter Kira Butler talking here. This event was in a converted barn across the parking lot called Gateway House of Prayer. For the last 15 years has been open 24 hours a day to the faithful to worship when the main church is closed, with parishioners keeping watch in shifts. It was a Thursday night. Gradually, about 22 congregants, mostly seniors, all of whom were members of the community, filtered in. Over the next 2 hours, the group prayed, sometimes quietly, sometimes very loudly, and sometimes in strings of syllables. And it went on talking about a charismatic tradition known as speaking in tongues. Of the prayers that I can understand, many were what you'd hear in any church: gratitude for God's goodness and entreaties for family members going through hard times. but interspersed were more unsettling messages, frequent references to the enemy, to a battle between good and evil, to a spiritual war playing out in our country. Sound familiar? One prayer leader encouraged attendees to join a pair of prophets who were taking daily communion for 90 days at exactly 4:14 p.m. Why so precise? The answer can be found in two Old Testament verses, Esther 4:14, which says Christians are called to speak up in the face of persecution, and Nehemiah, I'm sorry, I mispronounced that, which is about fighting, the prayer leader said, on behalf of our sons, our daughters, and our families. So if they're talking about just regular spiritual warfare in a non-literal sense, then why are these people gathered together in prayer talking about fighting and warfare and actual physical warfare? The devotees she mentioned were leaders of the New Apostolic Reformation, a charismatic evangelical Christian movement led by a new network of self-appointed prophets and apostles who claim God speaks directly to them. Often in dreams, they believe that Christians are called to wage a spiritual battle for control of the United States. In the vanguard of an ascendant Christian nationalist movement, they are seeking an explicitly Christian command of public schools, social policy, and all levels of government, including the courts. Some scholars claim NAR is the fastest growing spiritual movement in the United States. Evangelical writer C. Peter Wagner, as I mentioned before, described it as the most significant shakeup in Protestantism since the Reformation. Its laser focus on starting a spiritual war to Christianize America has led the Southern Poverty Law Center to call NAR the greatest threat to U.S. democracy you have never heard of. Estimates of Christians influenced by NAR vary widely from 3 million to 33 million. This is the outbranching of the Christ for Nations type of biblical school. There are hundreds of these across the country, and they are creating these types of adherents. It gets even deeper here. The Texas Observer. In June of 2024, our last August Dallas business consultant Lance Waldow, sound familiar? Again, addressed the Awaken the Sleeper conference at Vita Church in Mesa, Arizona. Dressed in business casual and speaking off the cuff in a lively style that mixed humor with right-wing anti-media vitriol, he spoke for nearly an hour about a coming global economic meltdown, the evils of the left, and how Christians should respond. I can't help but prophetically wanting to tell you the future, he said, because U.S. Christians have been too politically disengaged, he warned. The entire system will be taken over by a horned entity that will put its arms around the church and the economy and squeeze it into compliance, including locking up the preachers. Sounds like some really violent prayer, spiritual warfare talk going on there. Walner's YouTube show, which aired an excerpt from the Mesa Talk, has about 64,000 subscribers. His fellow North Texan and self-described prophet Cindy Jacobs once attributed to the 2011 tsunami that devastated the Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan, along with the earlier mass death of birds in Arkansas, to the Obama administration's repeal of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. Some readers, Christian and non-Christian, may be tempted to write off such comments as mere fundamentalist nonsense. That would be a mistake. Texans like Walnow and Jacobs, who take the titles apostle and prophet, are quite serious, and their version of Christianity, which an early leader named the New Apostolic Reformation, that's C. Peter Wagner, in the 1990s, is growing in nationwide religious and political influence, becoming, as two experts have deemed it, one of the most important Christian religious and political movements of our time. Despite its name, a 2011 Texas Observer story revealed its ties to the then-Governor Rick Perry, but it's recently drawn attention nationally and in Texas, reflecting its growth in the Christian landscape and the close ties of some of its NAR leaders to ex-president and now re-elected president, thank you very much to you Maga jerks, President Donald Trump, and other GOP luminaries. It's also drawn criticism even in evangelical circles. And then we have J.D. Vance. And Mother Jones wrote a similar companion story to their November-December Christian Nationalist series in 2024 to talk about J.D. Vance and his association with the Theobros. And you can guess the Theobros are what? New Apostolic Reformationists. On July 15th, when former President Donald Trump first appeared at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, he brought along two new accessories. One was a large hand bandage covering his ear, which had been nicked by a would-be assassin's bullet. The other was Ohio's first-term senator and hillbilly elegy author J.D. Vance, who was about to debut as the GOP vice presidential hopeful. 2 days later, after paying tribute to his wife, Usha, the child of immigrants from India, and the three biracial kids, Vance portrayed a vision of America that resonated deeply with Trump voters. America is not just an idea, he said solemnly. It is a group of people with a shared history and a common future. It is, in short, a nation. To many viewers at home, this seemed like the stuff of a boilerplate patriotic stump speech. But the word shared history lit up a far-right evangelical corner of social media. America is a particular place with a particular people, Joe Webon, a Texas pastor and podcaster, wrote on X. This is one of the most important political questions facing America right now, posted former Trump administration official William Wolf. Answer it wrong and we will go the way of Europe, where the native-born populations are being utterly displaced by third-world migrants and Muslims. Answer it right and we can renew America once more. Vance was embracing one of their most cherished beliefs. America should belong to Christians and more specifically, white ones. The American nation is an actual historical people, says Stephen Wolfe. No relation to William, the author of the 2022 book, The Case for Christian Nationalism. Not just a hodgepodge of various ethnicities, but actually a place of settlement and rootedness. For this group of evangelical leaders, Vance, a 40-year-old former Marine who waxes rapturous about masculinity and women's revered roles as mothers, even though he wears eyeliner all the time, was the perfect tribute to spread their gospel of patriarchal Christian nationalism. For years, braying, cocky evangelicals have faithfully made the rounds at conservative events. However, as Wolfe, a 41-year-old Princeton postdoc, writes in his book, these men in wrinkled, short-sleeve golf shirts sitting plump in their seats are yesterday's Christians. Among younger activists, they inspire the rolling of eyes, and they are the embodiment of an ineffective boomer approach taking over the United States for Jesus. In their place, a group of young pastors hope to spearhead a Christian nationalist glow-up as they eagerly await a Christian prince to rule America. I wonder who that prince could possibly be. These bearded, dirty, 30 and 40-somethings have suits that actually fit. They are extremely online, constantly posting on myriad platforms, broadcasting their youth shows from man caves and convening an endless stream of conferences for like-minded followers. Let's call them, as one scholar I spoke with did, the Theo Bros. Now, anybody can just go to a Bible school and become an ordained minister. All you have to do is go through the right tracks of courses, graduate with a degree, pursue perhaps a doctorate in divinity or theology, and get a certificate from some kind of school. Bible school, that is, accredited or unaccredited, and voila, you are a doctor or ordained minister. Now, to be fair as well, because anybody can just become an ordained minister, there's really nothing to prevent complete wackos from potentially becoming preachers and running around and grifting everybody and running churches to the ground and into the ground and being absolute hellions on earth, even in the name of God. But the problem is that we have a Bible school called Christ for the Nations, which actually espouses beliefs that are drivers for Christian nationalism and for the kind of mega hatred and bigotry that exists today that we are seeing ever present in our government and in legislatures in red states across the country. If you look at this, Christ for the Nations, they are considered, according to this article by Mira Fox and Forward, a Jewish independent magazine, Christ for the Nations is associated with the New Apostolic Reformation movement, a Christian nationalist ideology whose teachings say that Christians must take over the U.S. government. The Seven Mountains Mandate, a central part of Project 2025, says that Christians must conquer the seven mountains of society, including government, media, and entertainment, and also a belief associated with the NAR. That said, it can be hard to pinpoint specifically affiliated NAR symbols, beliefs, or institutions because it's not an official sect within Christianity. Unlike Catholics or Southern Baptists, there's no elected or ordained official head or governing body, nor is there even a website. The NAR doesn't have a set of official stances or annual conference where the members congregate or even discuss major topics of the day. Instead, the movement's name was coined by an evangelical writer in the 1990s. His name, I believe, is C. Peter Wagner, and since then has existed only in the form of loosely affiliated web of pastors, churches, and adherents. How convenient that we look at that and say, well, we really can't pinpoint exactly what it is that these people think and believe. Yet if we go to the actual website for Christ for the Nations School, we have their doctrinal beliefs here on the website. We believe in God's Bible is God's divine standard and righteous measurement for followers, and we go with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have the religious beliefs then. And in the religious beliefs, we have a whole bunch of behaviors and lifestyles that they claim violate God's belief or God's plan for humankind, or living the biblical life, whatever you want to call it, the world Bible view of how we're supposed to conduct ourselves. And in these behaviors, lifestyles that are prohibited by the school, is we have same-sex marriage, we have lesbianism, which is compared to bestiality, incest, pornography, pedophilia, transgenderism, transsexual conduct, and any number of things that they establish using the Bible to basically wage and engage in spiritual warfare against individuals who basically who are engaged in these kinds of behaviors. And it goes on and on and on, a whole bunch of things that they like and don't like. Some of them, many will agree with, and a lot of them, like the transgender and the LGBTQ community, are what they typically tend to preach. But make no mistake, just the same way that Vance Belter's extreme actions and his being one cog in the wheel of a much larger driving force, the number of adherents isn't the extent of its influence for NAR. Its main tenets have moved beyond the confines of churches and into the political mainstream, largely thanks to traveling apostles and prophets who preach at evangelical churches all over the world. Fred Clarkson, a senior research analyst with the extremism watchdog group called Political Research Associates, described the New Apostolic Reformation as a seismic cultural shift. It's the transformation of an entire society with this certain kind of Christocentric worldview, he told me. We're talking about something that's so transcendently revolutionary that most people never even thought about something like this. Donald Trump's former National Security Advisor, Mike Flynn, has hosted NAR leaders on his Reawaken America tour. House Speaker Mike Johnson has worked with its apostles. Just this past weekend, which would have been in June of 2024, GOP presidential hopeful J.D. Vance, whom we've already talked about at length, appeared in Pennsylvania at an event hosted by Lance Wallnau, a Texas business strategist turned NAR superstar. Wallnau has called Kamala Harris a Jezebel and has speculated that people on the political left may be controlled by demons. Helped develop Project 19, a right-wing political initiative to win 19 key counties and swing states for Trump. Sounds like the precursor to Project 2025. I asked Clarkson for a metaphor to describe how a new apostolic reformation concepts have spread beyond the confines of the movement. At first, he suggested the cellular process of osmosis, or perhaps a teen fusion, but rather accounts for the intentionality of the movement's leaders. How do you infuse your Christian ideas into Babylon? He asked, referring to an ancient city that rejected God. That's the nature of their thinking. It can be deeply subversive and also utterly in your face. Since 2016, many NAR prophecies have concerned Trump, whom adherents see as being divinely chosen to lead the country. Trump's introduction to the movement came in 2002 when he invited Florida apostle Paula White Cain to be his personal minister after seeing her preach on television. By the time he became president, he had acquired a handful of other NAR spiritual advisors, most notably South Carolina-based apostle named Dutch Sheets and prophet Cindy Jacobs. Again, these players, who helms an influential ministry in Texas. Throughout his presidency, Trump's NAR counselors were mostly ignored by White House reporters, dismissed as latter-day versions of evangelical Pastor Billy Graham with Richard Nixon or Jeremiah Wright with Barack Obama. Yet these are the key religious people around Donald Trump and the people who brought him the presidency, Clarkson said. They're the people who influenced his presidency and the people who are leading the religious wing of his re-election campaign, and now they have brought him back to the presidency once again to wreak all of his havoc on America. As the 2020 election drew near, the role became more important. White Cain warned her followers that Christians who don't support Trump will have to be stand accountable before God one day. Shortly after Trump's defeat, Sheets became an influential figure in the Stop the Steal campaign, leading rallies across the country. He warned that the results of the presidential election were going to be overturned and President Trump's going to be put back in office for 4 years. Around the same time, White Cain gave a speech imploring religious Americans to strike and 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 strike until you have victory. 8 days before the Capitol insurrection on January 6th, a group of apostles held a strategy meeting with Trump and his advisors. In a January 1 blog post, she shared a dream from a prophet named Gita Golston, in which she described moving forward toward the Capitol, not at full gallop, but a steady, determined, fast trot. As we began, written in white letters on the ground in front of us are the words, "Don't stop." A year after the insurrection, Sheets recounted a dream in which Trump had told him that he would be a political martyr because he said, loosely quoting the Bible, "God has put the tools in me to tear down, root up, and confront the system." So it's by no accident that the bigotry, vitriol, prejudice, and all of the hate-mongering, grifting, and greed from all of these mega churches trying to steal from the poor is the driving force that is currently behind Maga. And they chose Donald Trump after he got involved with them to make them hoist him upon the petard of the U.S. presidency so he could implement all of their policies. Basically, he is the vehicle, and they are the ones driving the ship. And there is no greater threat to democracy today than those who are driving the ship and running MAGA. And as you can see, it all comes together if you think about it. You have the mix of Donald Trump and all of his incredibly, horribly subhuman flaws and criminality, sociopathology, and you have a theocratic movement that wants to rule the United States with an iron fist. They can't do that with a democracy that features separation of church and state, so they have to use extensive extremist influence in order to get that done. Trump has presented them with that reality and the ability to make that into reality, and they have embraced it and they have pushed it. Make no mistake, this is the essence behind MAGA and what's driving all of the things they're seeing unfolding in the United States government today, and everything that's happening in Congress and in red states to destroy democracy and subvert the rule of law and put us all under the thumb of a maddening and basically destructive political regime that we feel suffocated under. In the future, I will talk more about dominionism, one of the most insidious parts of this Christian nationalism that is trying to take over the United States, that you again have never heard of. And it's very important that you do. My name is Scott Schneider. I am fed up in Minnesota.